Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Time for another segment on building this new ST70 kit. If there's any parts or tools that are specific to this segment or the build in general, check the description below. Can't guarantee that these links are going to be good months from now, so if they're dead when you go to look, you may have to go hunt these parts somewhere else. Don't email me. I'm not going to hunt them up for you. So that said, let's get busy building. Okay, so one of the things we did since the last video, you do need to get 2 of these grounding lugs and attach them to this point right here with a 440 screw and a keeps nut, and you want to get this pretty tight. This is your main star ground point for the whole amp. Also put 1 lug over here under this transformer screw, and that's where we're going to hook the power cord ground up to, over in a different location from the star ground. Always do that. And this is about as close as I can get to the power cord input location that's a really solid ground point. Normally on my own amps I drill a hole and have a dedicated screw, and that's kind of the UL listed way of doing it, but in this case this output transformer bolt can be tightened up really tight, so we're going to use this as our safety ground point that we're going to be installing. Again, if you're going to wire it up with a 2-prong cord, 2-wire cord that comes with the amp, you don't need to do this. But we're going to use a 3-wire grounded cord. So the other thing that I do when I'm soldering onto speaker jacks like this, or anything that's like this that has like a shiny coating on it, I get a file and file off a little bit of that upper coating to get down to the brass, and then put some flux on it. And that way I know I'm getting a really good solder connection to the like core material, and the flux just makes it solder much easier. So we've attached a small ground wire, like it comes with some wire, but I've got my own wire that I'm going to use, and I like color coding this stuff, so I got a little 20 gauge stranded black wire that I'm going to run from here over to the star ground point, and another one from this speaker jack over here. So we've got, like all these wires, and you can see I've twisted some of them together. The first thing I'm going to do is try to get as many of these wires connected as possible and just get them out of our way. And the other thing is to twist up the pairs that are going to be twisted together now, so that you know which ones go together. So these are the heater wires that are going to come over to this tube. And you can also see I labeled these the way the instructions have them as V1, V2, V3, V6, V7. I guess that would be V4 and V5, or yeah, but those aren't valves. So anyway, I guess that's the way they numbered them. So anyway, that's the way the instructions have them numbered, and the way this sheet here has them numbered. And I'm going to follow most of this routing, because the lead dress and how you route these wires is important. And so I know this works and this is quiet, so we're going to route the wires the way this diagram is showing. Now it doesn't come with these little clamps. I kind of wish it did, because with those clamps it holds the wires like here, instead of them being able to like get into this stud that's sticking up. So I got my Dremel tool and cut these studs off just so they can't rub through the insulation in the future. Just get them out of the way. They don't need to be there. So twist these 2 green wires together. They're going to be the heaters that come over here to this first valve or tube. This is the 2 red wires. They come over here to the rectifier tube. These 2 white wires are going to come over here to the rectifier tube. These 2 are the power input wires. They're going to go with, the power comes into the transformer from the wall outlet. So we're going to twist those together. Then we have these brown ones that are the heaters that are going to come over here to these tubes. And then this is the green with the yellow stripe and the brown with the yellow stripe. These are the center taps for the heaters, and they're going to come over here. So it already looks neater to me getting them like kind of twisted together like that. And then I can't remember which one. One of these goes to the bias supply. I think it's this red with the black. And then the red and the black is the bias supply. And then this is the center tap for the high voltage that goes to the star ground point. So we've got all those kind of figured out. And then on the output transformers, we have these 3 wires that come up here to the speaker jacks. And they're going to be like the first wires I hook up just to get these like connected and out of our way. And then these yellow ones come up here to the global negative feedback on the driver board. Now on the output transformer, there is a blue and green that have a white stripe that go to one tube, and then there's the blue and green with no stripe that go to the other tube. And the ones with no stripe go to the front tube, the ones with a stripe go to this back tube. And the same thing is on this side. The blue and the white go to this tube. The ones without the stripe go to the tube in the front of the amp. And then here, little choke wires are going to come over here to our capacitor. I'm not going to install this capacitor until later, until I get like most of these wires out of our way. And then these are the 2 wires that go to the B plus to the output transformer that power up the output tubes. And we're going to hook those up later too. So we're going to get most of these, pairs of twisted wires hooked up before we like put the capacitor in and start hooking up the choke and all that stuff. But the first thing I want to do is get these speaker leads connected. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit like that, since we're going to be working the back of the amp. And I want to give it a little bit of a loop like this. So we got a little bit of a excess wire here to work with. And snip that off. And then strip back a little of that wire. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tin this guy. Oop, let me get my fan turned on. And we're going to put solder on this guy. I'm probably just going to show you doing one of these on camera, so you get an idea of how I do this. So got that soldered up, and we're gonna heat this up. And it gets a little extra smoky with the extra flux on there. I'll make sure we get the solder onto this tab really well. And I'm going to come in and lay this wire into that solder just like that. And there we go. That's not going anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the rest of these speaker wires on both sides, and I'll come back and show you what we do from there. Okay, so we got the speaker wires connected back here, and I went ahead and wrapped this yellow wire around the back here. Got the choke wires out of our way, and got this red power wire all tucked over here in this corner, because we're going to wire those up later, and just getting them out of our way. Same thing over here. We've got the 3 speaker wires hooked up. The brown is the 4 ohm, orange is the 8 ohm, yellow is the 16 ohm that goes to the negative feedback loop on the driver board. Then we have the red wire for the output transformer tucked over here in this corner too, just to get it out of our way. So here is the ground from the negative speaker terminal. Runs up here to there. You could run it around the back of the transformer if you wanted to. I don't think it really makes a lot of difference. We got this one run up here. And then when you see how I get this laid out, we're trying to make these wires cross at 90 degrees to these other wires as much as possible. And like this wire is going to be looped up and around. So yeah, I wanted to keep this negative wire away from the power switch in the 120 volt AC. That's one of the reasons I ran it across the front here. But anyway, the instructions say to run it around the back. Either way it'll work. So we've got this soldered up. Now the next thing I'm going to do, and again, I'm just wiring this thing the way I would, or going in the order that I would if I was building this amp from scratch. I want to go ahead and tie pins 1 and 8 together on each of these tubes. Does a couple of things. We're putting it in the lower hole. There's an upper and a lower hole on each one of these pins. We're putting 18 gauge solid wire across between pins 1 and 8 on each of the output tubes. And that just kind of helps me visualize that, okay, those aren't the heater wires. And we got to do that anyway. So let's go ahead and solder these little jumpers in. And you don't want to just flood these with solder where it runs down the pin into where the hole where the tube goes. That's a bad thing to do. But you still want to put enough solder on there. And if you feel more comfortable putting the amp on its side when you're doing these so the gravity doesn't pull it down into the tube, it's probably a good thing. I can't really do that and film it, so we're doing it like this. I'm just being careful not to just flood this with solder. And like I said, having these pins used helps me visualize when I'm hooking up the heater so I don't make a mistake and hook them up to the wrong place. Because the next thing we're going to do is run the heaters over to this first tube. Again, my goal is to get rid of as many of these jumbles of wires as I can before we start adding other wires. Okay, so now we've got pins 1 and 8 on each of the output tubes connected together, and these will eventually get pulled up here to this front 8-pin socket. But again, we do that later. So next thing I want to do is go ahead and connect up the 6.3 volt heaters to the output tubes. And you want to twist these up like this. You want to make sure that you don't have like one wire twisted around the other wire. You want them to be twisted together like this, where there's like kind of a 45-degree angle with the wires. And then these are going to come up here and connect to pins 2 and 7. And you want it kind of over here against the chassis over here, because the chassis acts kind of as a shield for the 6.3 volt here. And then I like having these fairly even from where they split. Like I wouldn't do it like, you know, have one short then the other one just wrapping around like that by itself. I would pull the pair of them together over here and then have them split like that. So let me trim these off that. As you can see, those are fairly even from where it was split. And then put it through this lower hole. And then fold it over. Like that. And then little pliers like this are really handy. These little jeweler needle nose. One of the main things is make sure there's no little stray wires going somewhere they shouldn't be. You want to make sure that all the strands go through the hole. And then fold that guy over like that. You can come in and give it a little pinch like that. And then double check you don't have any of these little, that's really, it's kind of going out a little closer to that number 8 pin than I would like, so I'm going to trim that off. There we go. Again, the key is make sure there's no little loose strands hanging out. They're going to end up shorting to something. And then like I said, I kind of wish they had that little clamp, but I'm not sure why they decided to leave that out of the kit. We're just going to help hold all that in place for you while you're working on this. But anyway, here we go. And again, you might want to turn the amp on its side so gravity works with you on this, so you don't have any solder like run down into that round part of the tube socket where the tube pin goes, because that would definitely be a problem. Even some flux running down in there would be a bad thing, so. But you definitely want to put enough solder on it too. Let's see, one little loose strand there that I'm not sure really got soldered well. There we go. See, one of the things when this comes around here and connects, it'll help hold that down. So anyway, we're going to be using the upper holes to daisy chain over to this tube. So that's why we put them in the bottom hole. So go ahead and solder up this heater, doing the same thing. And as you can see, both of the single wires are about the same distance from the Y point. Come in here and solder up this heater. And there we go. So that wraps up another segment of this ST70 new kit build. Want to add that this is not sponsored by Tubes for Hi-Fi, nor do I have any affiliation with them. This kit was drop shipped to me by a viewer that commissioned me to build this for them. Now, I don't normally do like kit builds professionally, so yeah, I may or may not be willing to do it in the future. We'll see what that's all about, but For now, we're just doing this one for the channel and for some fun. I want to thank all you Patreon supporters and folks that make donations at my website. If you find this information useful, please consider joining my Patreon or making a donation at my website. It really helps fund future projects and keeps this channel going. I also want to thank you regular viewers and especially you subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click the subscribe button. It's not a big deal to do. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps the channel grow and other people see my fun content. So that's going to wrap this up. Until the next segment, have a nice day.